So most slap bass lines are played in the key of E, right? Most players, usually when they're asked to play slap bass, they'll play in the key of E, and the first and last notes are usually that open E. And a lot of bass teachers, a lot of bass players will always tell you, you have to play in keys other than E. You have to learn how to play slap bass in other keys and not just play it in E. And I think the problem with that advice is that it leaves out a big element that is very important before we start working on playing in keys other than E. And that is, what is it that's so attractive about playing in the key of E? Why are most slap bass lines played in the key of E? Why do we default to that? Now, if I were to ask you why that is, would you know the answer? Could you give me one reason why we default to playing slap bass in the key of E? And most people will not know. Most people don't really have an answer to that. And that's a problem, because if we want to work on playing in other keys, we first have to understand why it is that we play in the key of E, so that we can then work on developing our technique in a way that allows us to bring those elements into playing in different keys. Now, I can tell you that for me, there's 3 reasons why I really like playing in the key of E. And the first reason is that I just really like the sound of that open string. There's just nothing that really sounds quite like it. When you fret a note, it just doesn't sound the same. And as far as that reason goes, that's just a physical limitation of the instrument. There's nothing really we can do about that. We can use altered tunings. We can tune our open strings in different ways so that the open string is a different note. But I'm just gonna forget about that. That's one thing that we're just not gonna have in other keys, is that open string. But the other 2 reasons we actually can work on, and we can do something about that. Now, the second reason is that when you play in the key of E, when you're using that open E string, it doesn't compromise any of the other 4 fingers in your left hand, meaning that I can play that E and still have all 4 fingers free to do whatever I want. And the third reason is that when we play in the key of E, we can keep that low E ringing while we play with the other 4 fingers in the left hand. And we can use the other 4 fingers while that's ringing without having to mute that string, which I think is really cool. You're not going to do that all the time, but it is cool to do sometimes. So I'm going to show you a cool little thumb trick we can use with the left hand to kind of bring those 2 elements into playing in other keys. And what that is we're going to wrap our thumb around the neck and actually use it to fret the note on the E string. So let's say I wanted to play that line I played in the beginning of the video in G sharp, so right here on the 4th fret. So I'm going to take my thumb, wrap it around, fret that G sharp with my thumb. So now I have that G sharp fretted down on the low E string, and all 4 fingers are still free to do anything. So we can play stuff like, and if I want to, I can play that while keeping that G sharp ringing, like I talked about in one of the reasons for playing an open E. Now, there are ways you can do that without using that thumb approach, but there's a few little problems that come along with it. So one way you can do it, and I think the way that most people would do it, is they would bar that 4th fret with their index finger and play it like this. But the problem is that you can't do that one trick of keeping the low E ringing while playing short or staccato notes on the other strings. What I mean by that is not keeping it ringing. It's going to be really hard to do, because if you're fretting with your index finger, you're going to have to kind of lift your finger up in a weird way to keep the E ringing and mute the D, or you're going to have to come up with a way to mute it with your right hand. But then there's another thing to think about. It's another thing that's going to slow you down, because you have to use your right hand for other stuff. So I don't like that. And the other way you can do it is you can use different fingers for each of those notes. But the problem with that is that now you're taking up 2 fingers, whereas with the open E, remember we had all 4 fingers free while we were playing. Now I'm using 2 fingers for this. And when you get to this, if you're used to playing octaves like this, there's another problem. You're gonna have to go take your index from the A string to the E string pretty quickly, and that's usually not going to sound very smooth. See, I have to kind of, when I'm playing that A, I'm actually keeping my finger flat so that I can roll it into the E string, because if I keep it like this, I'm gonna have to lift it, bring it up. It's just more work. Economy of motion is gone. I just don't find it very effective. So that thumb trick kind of helps. See, I just have to, when I'm done playing that, I wrap my finger around and it's right there. So that's a cool little trick that I use from time to time. Like I said, if I need to use my fingers for anything else, if I need to keep that low E ringing while I'm doing stuff with my other fingers, I use that trick, wrapping your thumb around, fretting the note on the E string with your thumb. It's not something I do all the time. It's not something that I recommend you do all the time, but it's just a technique or a strategy that you can use if you're trying to emulate those elements of playing an open E in different keys. So if you have to keep the low E ringing while you're playing something, you can do that. If you need to use these fingers for playing something for whatever reason, and you can't compromise them by having them on that low E string, just use your thumb right there. So it's a useful thing that I use from time to time. It comes in handy, and I hope you guys enjoy that. I hope you like that. And if you did, make sure to give this video a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys soon.